and welcome back to the Inside of My Head. Okay, so we know that the Paramount Plus Halo TV show will be going slightly off track from the storyline we all know and love from the games, which honestly probably isn't going to be a good thing. Basically, they've gone non-canon and they've come up with something called the Silver Timeline, which will probably revolve around Silver Team. I mean, God knows what happened to Blue Team. And that allows them to cherry pick the elements they want to keep and add in whatever they feel like. But I wanted to put a few videos together detailing what we know about the various aspects of Halo. This video is more for like newcomers to the universe, and if that's you, trust me, this universe is amazing, but it can be a little confusing at first. But even if you're a seasoned vet, there might be a few tidbits in here for you too. Please bear in mind that these videos are going to be based on the games and the lore, and depending on how many liberties the show is going to take, there might be some differences. There'll probably also be some spoilers for the show in here, so you have been warned. But before we go on, if you love sci-fi, mecha, kaiju, all that kind of good stuff, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, as it really helps me and the channel out. So the Covenant is a huge, and I mean vast, alliance of multiple races of aliens that worship an ancient race called the Forerunners. At one stage, they controlled most of the Orion arm of the galaxy. The Covenant is a caste system, meaning there's a distinct hierarchy to it. And on top of the tree, we have the three Sanshium hierarchs. At first, the Covenant was comprised of two races, the Sankaili, otherwise known as the Elites, and a faction of the race of Sanshium, or Prophets as they're known to humans. Now, at first, they started out as opponents in a war, but after the conclusion of that war, they came together to form the Covenant. Now, let me talk about this war between the Sanshium and the Sankaili for a second, because it really is quite interesting. The way this war happened is that the Sanshium were themselves divided into two factions, the Reformists and the Stoics. And the Reformists wanted to use a Forerunner artifact referred to as the Forerunner Dreadnought, which not only contained the Oracle of Forerunner artificial intelligence, but it could output colossal amounts of energy. And the Reformists wanted to use the Dreadnought to enhance their technological capabilities. But as well as this, they thought that by studying the Dreadnought, they could learn more about the Great Journey, but I'll come back to that in a minute. The Stoics believed this to be heresy, and that the Dreadnought should not be entered or tampered with in any way. But because of the Stoics' reluctance to learn from Forerunner technology, they fell behind in terms of technological advancements. And because the Reformists were able to quickly develop better weapons, etc., they were able to overpower the Stoics and steal the Dreadnought. In the process, they inadvertently broke off a large piece of rock from their homeworld, Jano Quam, and I'll come back to that later. You with me so far? Let's do a quick recap. So we've got this race called the Sanshium. They find this big fancy ship and they're like, oh, what should we do with it? One bunch of them are like, hey, let's use it to advance technology. And the other guys are like, oh, no, this is holy, we shouldn't. So there's a big war between those two guys, and then the horny Reformists are like, hey, this is mine now, and they bugger off with it. So the Reformists have their Dreadnought, woo, and they're studying the Forerunners, woo, but they mistranslate and misunderstand many of the subtle meanings of the Forerunner glyph.
Break down the elemental components of energy on a single constant K rate, extrapolate reach of the...
and end up incorrectly interpreting the activation of the Halo array as a means of achieving divinity. A process they come to call the Great Journey. So basically, they think that flipping the switch on the Halo array and turn the fucking thing on is gonna make them gods. But no, it's just gonna kill them. Sometime later, the Sanshium Reformists run into an ancient species called the Sankaili and make friends, but quickly realize that the Sankaili also think it's heresy to mess around with Forerunner artifacts too, just like the Stoics did. Oh dear. So the Sankaili sent an arbiter to meet with a delegation of Reformists, and the arbiter ended up lopping all their heads off, and this choppy time is what started the war. The war eventually settled into a stalemate between the two species. How might you ask, considering that these ET creatures are clearly no physical match for the Elites, and that they were considerably outnumbered by their enemy? Well, they had one thing going for them, and that's this thing. The fact is that most of the battles in this war were space battles, and given that their tech was inspired by Forerunner tech, they had quite the advantage in ship-to-ship combat. So the stalemate went on until both sides realized that both species' extinctions was a possible outcome. So the writ of the Union was signed between the Sanshium Reformists and the Sankaili, and a religious empire known as the Covenant was born. Now, we'll talk more about this in my Sankaili Explained video, which will be out in a couple of days, hopefully. But for now, let's move on. So the Covenant have this complex government with 10 echelons, with a High Council at the top, which itself is presided over by 3 hierarchs, who were chosen by the Oracle that was found in the Dreadnought. Remember, it was found with its artificial intelligence? Anyway, this government decides how best to carry out the Covenant's ultimate goal of reclaiming and reactivating the Halo rings to ultimately transcend and walk among the gods. At least that's what they think is going to happen. The Covenant built an enormous space station that they named High Charity, built around the piece of rock broken off from the San Shum's homeworld of Janua Quo. And this space station came to be the center of their vast empire, which gradually expanded to include several other races. I'll do a video for each race, but just briefly, the Jiralhane, or brutes, the Kig-Ya, known as the jackals to the humans, the Amgali Kogolo, or hunters, the Ungoi, or grunts, and the Yanmi, and the Huragok as well. At some point, the Covenant came across a human-inhabited planet called Harvest. Whilst most members of the Covenant thought that humans would just be another race that would be brought into the fold of the Covenant, the Hierarchs knew that this race of plucky little primates were the true heirs to the Forerunner legacy, and that knowledge, should it spread throughout the rest of the Covenant, would throw the whole empire into absolute chaos. So fearing the disintegration of their empire, and therefore the loss of their own power, the Hierarchs decreed that the humans should be wiped from the galaxy. And so started their genocidal campaign against humankind, exterminating planet after planet, even bombarding certain planets with plasma, scorching them down to their surface in a process called glassing. They would even brand the surface of the planet with the symbol of the Empire. Now, after about 28 years of this bloodshed, even though the Covenant didn't know the precise location of the human homeworld, they prepared for their final assault on human territory. And it's here they came across a little UNSC fortress world called Reach. Now, Reach is a planet I hope we see a lot of in the new Halo series, because I've got fond memories of playing Halo Reach. It might possibly be my favorite Halo game. Anyway, it's on Reach where the UNSC put up a massive defense, which was one of the bloodiest engagements of the war, leading to massive casualties on both sides. But despite the best efforts of the UNSC, Reach was lost. It's during this battle that most of the Spartan 2s were lost, as well as a huge part of the UNSC's military hardware, not to mention the most powerful military stronghold apart from the Earth itself. So this was a very, very big loss for the UNSC and humankind. However, the Covenant discovered that a UNSC ship called the Pillar of Autumn made a blind space jump in order to escape, a jump which led through pure blind luck to Installation 04, the first Halo ring from the first video game, the events of which led to a decisive battle and the unleashing of an ancient parasitic species called the Flood. Now, of course, the story of the Covenant doesn't end there by any means. As a result of the destruction of Installation 04 at the hands of Master Chief, there's a huge civil war in the Covenant called the Schism, prompted by the Hierarchs replacing the Sangheili with the Brutes. But, you know, not knowing what they're going to do with the Halo series, I might leave that for another video. Anyway, I hope this video has given you a little bit of background on the Covenant and made things a little bit clearer. I'm mainly making all these videos because I really wish somebody explained all this shit to me when I first started playing Halo. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one, but when I first started playing Halo, I kind of ignored all of the backstory and had absolutely no idea what was going on. I was just happy to be shooting aliens. But later, I learned that you can only really truly appreciate what Halo is when you get an appreciation for the amount of time they've spent crafting this whole universe. Let's leave it there for now, guys. I need to take my meds, so please feel free to remember Reach and get out of my head. And I will see you very soon for the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and cheerio, bye!